fans, welcome back to Room 237, and now we come to the last of the Amicus Anthology films. I know for several videos I said that 1981's The Monster Club is also one, but although produced by Milton Subotsky, it's not Amicus, and it came out after Amicus stopped making these. And it is one of only... I think it's actually the only one to not have Peter Cushing. No, one of two to not have Peter Cushing, and that is 1973's Vault of Horror. Tales from the Crypt was the other one without Peter Cushing. And like Tales from the Crypt, it's based on the EC Comics of the same name. Technically, it is considered a sequel, even though it has a different wraparound, very different vibe. And so, even the tagline is "Below the Crypt lies the Vault of Horror." In some places, it was released as Tales from the Crypt 2 or Further Tales from the Crypt, which I actually like that title because, oddly enough, despite all the great stories that Vault of Horror has, that was even adapted into the Tales from the Crypt TV show, neither of these four stories are Vault of Horror titles. 3 are from Tales from the Crypt, and 1 is from Shock Suspense Stories. Which is fine. They're still EC stories, but another thing is, well, I think a few of the Tales from the Crypt segments would later be adapted again into the HBO show. I'm pretty sure none of these segments have really been adapted into anything else. There are some episodes that are very similar to some of the segments in this, but the actual stories themselves were not in the Tales from the Crypt show. And this was directed by Roy Ward Baker, who also directed a number of Amicus and Hammer films, such as Asylum, and Now the Screaming Starts, which is a non-anthology, which I do have from Amicus. Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, Monster Club, Dr. Jekyll's Sister Hyde, Scars of Dracula, Vampire Lovers. He actually did the first horror film from Hammer, which is a Catermass in the Pit. More sci-fi, but the success of that is what led Hammer to venture further into horror. And it stars Terry Thomas, Kurt Jurgens, Tom Baker, Don Adams, Denholm Elliott, and Daniel Massey, among several other people. And I really enjoyed this film. The whole feel of it, the stories, the wraparound. I like it at least as much as Tales from the Crypt. I don't really remember much from Tales from the Crypt. It's been a little while since I've seen it. These definitely have their own feel from the rest of the Amicus films. I guess partly due to having more of like a classic gothic-y feel, or at least Crypt especially. Not having Peter Cushing. But I thought it was at least as good as Tales from the Crypt. I enjoyed all 4 stories. I know the third one is one that probably gets criticized the most, probably for its pacing or just the story itself. But I enjoyed all 4, and the wraparound is we have these 4 guys, one by one on different floors, get in the same elevator. excuse me, and the elevator just keeps going down until eventually it opens up to this one room. Very beautiful lounge type room. You know, very nice furniture, glass table, different those like personal bottles you usually see in like private offices. This I think they're called Steins. Could be wrong. Of alcohol, and they all sit around. They start talking. Also, the elevator has no push button to get out. There's no stairs, no windows. And they start talking about how this kind of feels like a dream. And the first guy talks about, you ever have those dreams that feel so real that you swear they're real? And that's our segue into the first story, which is his. But also that's our framework, is they all share these sort of recurring dreams or nightmares or sort of thoughts that keep coming back to them that they don't know where they come from. They swear they're real. I wanted to see if it had the main cast of just the four guys. Daniel Massey is Harold Rogers. Terry Thomas is Arthur Critchett. Kurt Jurgens is Sebastian. Michael Craig is Maitland. We do have an appearance by Glennis Johns, who, quick trivia about her, she's been in countless films, stage, television. She's 97 years old, still alive. The last movie she was in, which I did see when I was a kid, was a Superstar, Mary Catherine Gallagher. She was the grandmother. And what's interesting about her is she is the last surviving starlet or actor of any kind from the golden age of acting. So the only person that's acted in the 40s that's still alive. And I think that's it. The oldest Oscar nominee. Just a little tidbit that I thought was interesting because I love golden age of cinema, especially horror. She didn't do too much horror. I think this was one of her only appearances. But the first story, Daniel Massey, who plays Harold Rogers, he's this guy who... The story unfolds gradually. He gets a knock on his door, this sort of kind of sketchy, almost like a bum, but not really. Guy walks in. They have this cold conversation like, did you find them? He says, yes. Where are they? What's the address? We don't know what they're talking about. So he gives them the money and he says, she lives in here. You know, she lives in this town. I don't like the town. People there are strange, especially at night. And then, but no one followed you. No one knows I sent you or hired you. I'm very good at my job. Strangles him with his tie. I'm also going to get into spoilers because, like Tales from the Crypt or comics, movie, TV show, Twilight Zone, Tales from the Dark Side, there are twists to all these stories. So I'm going to get into spoilers. But I highly recommend this. This is more along like my favorite kind of anthology, not just because it's based on horror comics. Well, like Creepshow is inspired by horror comics. But I just really like these stories. Different kinds of horror. Or suspense, I guess, for like the third story. But I thought it was as good as Tales from the Crypt. I highly recommend both these films. And yes, for people who feel the need to be like, what is this ancient artifact? There is a Blu-ray of this double pack I think there's even Blu-rays of the films by themselves. But I do know this double pack is on Blu-ray. Definitely recommend it. I really enjoyed both these films. So he goes to this town, meets the woman that he hired the guy to find. Kind of find out it's his sister, long-lost sister. Their father passed away some weeks ago, left her everything. But he is the beneficiary. He'll get everything after she goes, so he kills her by stabbing her with a switchblade. He then goes down to this kind of fancy restaurant at night, which he's already been told several times. Like, he was walking around town at first, and he was getting warnings about not going out at night. His sister talked about how, you came here at night. Like, there's been all these cases, didn't say of what, 17 cases so far at night. Even the restaurant said, don't come back here at night, but he did anyway. So he orders a drink, and you can kind of tell where it's going. The glass looks like really thick orange V8, but you get what it is. And of course, he doesn't like the taste of it. He orders the soup, and it's this really dark red broth. Doesn't like the taste of that either. He asks what it is, and it's all blood. It's like bone marrow soup, or it's all these blood dishes. And of course, he spits it out, and that's when they all realize he's not one of them. And I thought this was one of the coolest vampire reveal scenes. It's sort of the opposite of From Dusk Till Dawn, because it is sort of like an instant, like, all of a sudden. Because the waiters, like, hold him. The other patrons and waiters are closing the curtains, even though it's dark out. And they open up this other curtain to this mirror. That's the whole wall. And the only I almost said reflection. Wow. Reflection that he can see is his own, even though there's a bunch of people standing next to him. So they're all vampires. So yeah, it's not as boom as like From Dusk Till Dawn, like all of a sudden. It's a little more subtle, but it is like an in-camera trick to have the people there, but not in the mirror. I thought it was a cool effect. I thought it was a neat reveal. That's how he figures it out. And then in walks his sister with the switchblade. And, of course, they hold him down. Now, supposedly what happens is they stab a drink tap into his throat, and they all start drinking his blood. But once they grabbed him, put him on the table, it went to like a freeze frame. And it says here that that's blacked out in the US DVD release. I mean, maybe the one by itself is blacked out. I think this was just freeze frame. And then it kind of ends with his sister taking a sip and then laughing, revealing her teeth. And that's the end of that story. And that was called Midnight Mess, which is Tales of the Crypt number 35. Now, the second story is actually one of my favorite ones of the whole film. It's definitely different. It is more of a humorous story. It does feel more Twilight Zone. But there's this guy, Arthur Critchett, who is played by, who was that? Terry Thomas. Now, he looked really familiar. Yes. He's known for a gap in front of his two front teeth, which does does play a part in this story. What else was he in? I think he was in Tales from the Crypt. I gotta go to a whole other page for his filmography. Let's see. I have looked him up before, so I know I've seen him in other stuff. Mad, 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 Mad World, which is a comedy that I actually really enjoy. Monster Go Home. I think he was in some giallos. Abominable Dr. Phibes and Dr. Phibes Rises Again. That's where I've seen him. Okay. Both of those are good, especially the first one. And his wife is played by Glennis Johns. And the story is called The Neat Job, and it's the one story that is a shock suspense story comic. The rest are Tales from the Crypt. But this one, the husband is this obsessive neat freak. Like, everything isn't just clean in the house. He has everything specifically put away, and so many, everything has to be at a perfect angle, certain distance apart from each other, which is semi-relatable. I mean, it doesn't look like it, but I try to keep my apartment as neat and nice as possible. I think I mentioned before, like, I used to have, like, a Dexter's apartment with how neat and straight and clean and organized everything was. But this guy is way over the top. And he keeps giving poor Glennis Johns shit for being a lousy housewife. And it's not that she is, it's just she can't keep up with how demandingly clean he wants it. There's even a part when she's talking to her friend about how she only married him for, I guess, his money, his security. And it's not like he's abusive or anything. I mean, he does yell at her and keep saying, "Can't you do anything neatly?" He does feel bad, though. And there's even one part where he's playing a record and he's, like, plugging up his ears to make sure it's at the right volume. But there's even a part where he feels bad, so he wants to cook her a meal. And he has everything put away just so, like, he doesn't even have to look at what he's doing. He can just reach out and grab it. And he reaches in the pantry for pasta sauce and pulls out something else because it was in the wrong spot. Takes her down to his workshop where he says he likes to build things because it makes him happy. And all his nails and screws and tools are all organized by size, and like the screws, size, thread, diameter. Everything is completely perfect. So the whole story sets, and like the more she messes something up or leaves something out of place, the more increasingly angry he gets. So we've set all that up, and by the end of the episode, she's listening to music, but she left, like, the record out. She wants to have a drink, and she looks up, and it's like 10 minutes before he's going to get home. So we have this humorous moment where she tries to get the record back in its sleeve and in the right spot, but everything she does just gets increasingly going to shit. Like, knocks something over, spills something, pulls the rug over it, or it goes down to the cellar to get, like, stain remover. She goes to clean it, but knocks the thing over and gets it all over the carpet, puts a throw rug over it. Then down in his workshop, she bumps into something, knocks a picture off the wall, takes some of the wall with it, goes down for a nail, and I mean, she's pulling drawers and knocking shit over. The whole house is wrecked by the end of it. So then he comes home and just has a meltdown, and she just snaps by hitting him in the head with a hammer and killing him. And by the end of it, you know, we see her down in the workshop, and she's kind of laughing to herself. Like, well, Arthur, I did it. House is all clean. Everything perfect and in the right order. I think I did a wonderful job. And we see this wall of jars where all his body parts are in it. And perfectly labeled. Like, you know, intestines, fingers, liver, heart, tongue, eyes. And then right down, it pans down to the bottom and we see a set of dentures with the gap in the teeth, so we know it's his. So she completely dissected, dismembered him, and organized him neatly. And it ends with her laughing. I just really like this story, I guess because there's nothing super, like really supernatural about it. I mean, with these kind of stories, I expect supernatural, and I get more into supernatural stuff like this than I do what you see in like a Blumhouse film. But this one was just kind of a fun, simple story, just about a guy with a certain problem. It goes way over the top, and it sort of backfires on him. I really like the performance of the husband and wife. You really do feel bad for Glennis Johns. She does seem really sweet, like she is trying. So you kind of don't blame her for snapping. And I don't know why. It was just kind of... It was probably my favorite story of the whole bunch. The third is probably my least favorite. Oh, and then when we see the guys in the room again, they ask him if he really is a neat freak, and he's like, no more than any other person. I guess implying either he's lying or, you know, it's just makes it all the more reason why it's a weird ass dream. But then the third one, probably my least favorite. This is from Tales from the Crypt number 33, and it's This Trick Will Kill You. And it takes place in India, and there's a guy doing sort of a magic show, but he's saying he's not calling it magic, he's calling it works of miracles from God, or he's performing miracles. Like he has a wicker basket that he puts his son in, puts the sword through it. There's blood all over the sword, but when he opens it, his son is fine. Or he sticks a knife through his cheek, out his other one, we see it in his mouth. And this is Sebastian's story. He's played by Kurt Jurgens, who he did look familiar, but I don't know. He's been in some Bond films. I should get in the habit of looking this shit up before my video so I don't have to pause and look, but lots of stuff in the 40s and 50s. All the way up through the 80s, wow. Nothing I've really seen, but so him and his wife are this married couple that are also magicians, and he goes up to the guy because he's watching the show, and he shows the whole crowd how he does the trick. Like, the basket has a door in the back, the knife he's using breaks apart and has magnets in it, and him and his wife are trying to think of what their new act is going to be. And he's walking around, he sees this young girl, or a sort of young woman, who I think is the daughter of the first guy, the first magician. And she is charming this rope, playing the thing, and the rope's coming out of the basket. So he's watching her, and then she kind of looks at him, and you kind of can tell by the look on his face he knows how it's happening. So then she puts her instrument down and then hops up on the rope and climbs it, climbs back down, and then charms it back into the basket. The guy comes up and looks, he takes the rope out, sees it's, limp. It's, a regular rope. And he can't figure out how she did it. So he offers to buy it. She refuses, says, it's been passed down. First he offers money to buy the trick, or to know how to do it. She says it's all in the rope, tries to buy it, she won't sell it to him. Goes home, talks to his wife, says, this is our ticket. If I can't figure it out, the audience will be able to figure it out. And so he goes and kills the girl to get the rope. And then him and his wife are trying it. His wife tries it and sees that, yeah, it does work. She's able to climb it. But as she's climbing the rope, she then disappears. Like, right out of thin air, she goes away. And there's like this patch, some blood on the ceiling. And then it coils around his neck and hangs him. And then we see the first guy that was performing the miracles doing something, and I think we see... I watched this last night, and that's why you saw that cut a little earlier, because I was making a video and I had to stop. Now I'm continuing it. I kind of forget how it ends, but it ends with him being killed by the rope anyway. It is sort of one of those morality tales that is sort of in character with Tales from the Crypt or even Twilight Zone. Bad people getting what they deserve, things backfiring. Even though it's my least favorite of this film, I could say I was still entertained by it. I wanted to see what would happen, even though it was predictable. Like, I knew, okay, the magic's going to backfire on him somehow. And then we go on to we see the guys back in the room. And then this guy, Maitland, tells his story. And it's called Bargain and Death. This is from Tales from the Crypt, number 28. Now, normally, from what I can tell, I think this is the one that probably gets the most criticism. This one isn't my least favorite. By the end, it was kind of like, well, it felt like they were trying to do too many things at once. I do know that there is a Tales from the Crypt episode that deals with being buried alive and sort of con artists. That one had, I think that was one with Lou Diamond Phillips. And it also had Cameron from Ferris Bueller as sort of like a, well, golly gee. I don't, it's not based on the same comic because, like I said, I think none of these were further adapted. But, he says this story starts in a casket, and it opens up with him in a casket, buried alive. Which, I always think it's funny how, when it shows people buried alive, when they use matches. Because I was thinking, would a match really burn in a casket because there's no oxygen? And then I remember, well, there's limited oxygen, but... I thought this episode, it sounded like he had to piece together how he got put there. But it's more just, it sort of backtracks and works its way up. It's a guy who, it's an insurance scam with his friend Alex. Who, he's going to take these pills to induce a heart attack. And then when he's buried, he's supposed to have his friend Alex. He's supposed to come in, dig him up so he can get his life insurance money or whatever. But of course, Alex decides not to help him. And yeah, there's these two trainee doctors who are gonna, I think, who help further along the paperwork that he is dead. They go to dig him up, and he leaps out of the coffin and gasps for air. And it scares Tom and Jerry. The two guys are named Tom and Jerry, which I think was done on purpose. They run off, and they run in front of Alex's car. He runs them over. Or Alex diverts them and hits a tree and explodes. And then Tom and Jerry make it back to the hole he's in, and the guy that was helping them, or this other gravedigger stabbed him and apologizes to them for damage to the head or whatever. So I guess he was double crossed by everybody. I don't know. I kind of forgot where this one was going, but I would have liked it better, because being buried alive, apart from that's like one of my biggest fears. That's why I really like movies like The Vanishing, which I really want to get on DVD and review that, 'cause it's been years since I've seen it. Buried with Ryan Reynolds, I meant to review that, but the ending pissed me off, but I really like Buried. There's one with Adrian Brody called Oxygen that I saw back in the 90s. It's one of my biggest fears, being buried alive. Just, there's no way out. And if no one knows where you are, then you're fucked. So I would have liked it better if that's why my favorite Tales from the Crypt episode is, I think it's the 3rd episode ever. Dig This Cat. It's a real dead one. It has a weird title. The one where the guy is the stuntman that can die because he has the cat's 9 lives. And he tells the story from within the coffin. But yeah, I would have liked it better if he had to recollect how he got there, instead of the whole insurance scam and double crossing. And then the last story, Tales from the Crypt number 26, is Drawn and Quartered. And this is a guy named Moore, who is played by Tom Baker. Which, that name sounds familiar. He sort of looks like a Barry Gibbs type guy. Long, 70s curly hair, big beard. I even think he has a light colored suit. He looks like Barry Gibb. He joined under Laurence Olivier on stage, so that's kind of cool. Filmography: Vault of Horror, Frankenstein: The True Story, which from the 70s. Dungeons and Dragons from 2000. I can't believe Jeremy Irons was still in that. Done more on TV, but anyway. So he's this painter that lives in Haiti. He doesn't have very much money. And he finds out that his paintings have been sold for a lot of money to these certain dealers. He ends up going to a voodoo priest. His hand that he paints with is given some sort of voodoo power. And basically whatever he does, whatever he paints or draws can be... basically becomes a voodoo doll of a painting. He can have a painting of a person, a real person, someone who's sitting there, and he can paint, black holes over their eyes, and, their eyeballs would fall out. Weird shit like that. And basically, it ends up coinciding with the self-portrait that he did. And he keeps it in a safe he ends up painting portraits of the three guys, like the two art dealers that bought his work, and then the critic that praised his work. Because I guess they told him his work was worthless. Then they turned around and whatever. So it's like the one guy he goes up to and he paints like a red dot over his head. Because the guy pulls a gun on him, and when he paints a red dot over his head, the guy like turns the gun on himself. I thought it was kind of cool that he knows what's going on and he's trying to fight it, like the liar, liar pen, and he still ends up shooting himself. And then he realizes that he's running out of breath because, and I thought this was kind of interesting. An interesting way to go with like the voodoo painting, because where he kept his self-portrait in a safe, there's no oxygen in it, so he's losing oxygen. And so he's racing to get back to his place so he can take it out. And so he took it out and he left it somewhere. There's a sunroof above it, and there's a guy doing something to a building. So then he's driving, the guy drops something, crashes through the window, and eventually the guy's like run over by a truck or something. Like, and like run. It doesn't show it, but you get the idea. It's really messy. And that's because the painter on the staging dropped a can of paint thinner through the skylight. It shows the painting and how it's all runny. I was like, okay, well, that's kind of interesting. This story was kind of slow. I like the idea of the voodoo painting. Took it a step further with, even if you put it in like a safe, it's gonna, if it's a painting of you, you're gonna lose oxygen, because, I don't know. I guess it did utilize that aspect in every way, because they could have just left it as, okay, at first, I thought it was just, okay, whatever he paints is gonna be the voodoo. But now it's just, no, the painting itself, whatever happens to it, is the sort of voodoo that will happen to the person. So at least they really utilized that whole plot device to its fullest extent. And then we get the finale, or the bookend, where they see a door, they have to ponder the meaning of these nightmares or dreams. And then there's this door that opens, and they all walk. When they look outside, they realize they're in a cemetery. So three of the guys walk out, and then they disappear one by one. And the guy Sebastian, the magician, pretty much gives us the exposition, which is we're all damned. Like, the stories are what really happened to us, and we had to we had to keep explaining our evil deeds for all eternity. And then when it shows the room they just walked out of, which looked like a very beautiful, fully furnished gentleman's club, is now a mausoleum. So then he walks over to a gravesite that's open, and then he disappears, it shuts, end of movie. And as an anthology, I thought it did a really good job. It had an interesting wraparound and framing work. I liked all the stories. I would say my least favorite one would have been the magic one, the one with the rope. But even that one still kept me interested. It definitely did feel like an EC movie, like how this one, Tales from the Crypt, it did have people in a crypt being told their fate, which of course we find out already happened. But there is a crypt keeper looking more like the comics than the HBO show, because it was way before the HBO show. But this one, you know, even though it did start out in like a very, you know, high society kind of room, it did end up being a vault or a mausoleum the whole time. And it did all revolve around people dying in these extraordinary ways because of errors of their ways or something they did or backfire. I mean, obviously the stories felt like EC stories because they all are. They're all Tales from the Crypt and shock suspense story comics. But I really enjoyed it. And I definitely feel like Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror, at least as far as the Amicus films go, they feel very different. This was the one where the cast didn't really stand out to me as much as the other ones. The other ones will have like Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, Donna Pleasance, Jack Palance, Burgess Meredith. There's usually, why can I not think of his name right now? Patrick McGee, you know, people like that. 2 or 3 or 4 actors each film. Even Tales from the Crypt didn't really have that kind of cast either. Actually, Tales from the Crypt did have Peter Cushing. Okay, and Joan Collins. And Patrick McGee. It's been a while since I've seen it, but it didn't really have that big all-star cast. Especially this one. I guess Tales from the Crypt actually did. But I would have to say these are... Yeah, they do feel a lot different than the other Amicus films. But I would say these two are the most consistently good and best of the Amicus anthologies. I mean, the 2 best ones, I would say, would be like Asylum and House That Dripped Blood. Torture Garden is very underrated. And then, you know, Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, From Beyond the Grave. They all have consistency issues, tone issues. But these 2 are definitely the ones that are consistently good all the way through. And they do have that 50s EC feel to them. And yeah, The Vault of Horror, definitely a great follow-up to Tales from the Crypt. And that's the last of the Amicus anthologies that I have. I just have the 2 Aftermath films, the Uncanny. Well, I don't have Monster Club, so I won't be doing that. And Tales That Witness Madness, which is just another British one that gets lumped in. I will be doing Trick or Treat by Halloween because I still have 2 Patreon requests to get to. This month has been shot for time. I haven't really had much time to do much of anything, but really enjoyed Vault of Horror. I know this video is long. I apologize for that. But anyway, yeah. Thank you for watching.